My family actually held a formal vote at the dinner table to steal my $90,000 house down payment. They decided the money belonged to my sister, the same woman who dumped her twin toddlers on our parents for 3 years to travel the world with a guy she barely knew. Now they needed a flashy new condo, and my savings account was their designated funding source. I was 7 months pregnant, sitting across from them, listening to my parents justify taking my hard-earned money. I did not scream, I did not cry or beg them to be reasonable. I just took a sip of my decaf tea, looked my father dead in the eye, and said, "Fine, you can have it on one condition." When I laid out that condition, every smug smile in that dining room completely vanished. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They entirely forgot who they were dealing with, and they had absolutely no idea I already owned the very house they were sitting in. Before I tell you exactly how I legally evicted my own parents and watched my sister lose everything, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to teach toxic family members a lesson they will never forget. Growing up in the Washington household meant living under the crushing weight of a carefully curated image. My parents, Marcus and Denise, were entirely obsessed with the concept of Black excellence. To the outside world specifically, their country club friends, and the congregation at our upscale church, we were the perfect, thriving family, living in a historic multi-million-dollar brownstone. But inside those expensive walls, love was strictly conditional, and the conditions were always rigged against me. I am Maya, 31 years old, and currently a director of data analytics. My husband Jamal is a highly successful wealth manager. By any normal metric, my parents should have been incredibly proud of the life we built together. But in my family, logic never applied to me. I was the dark-skinned, bookish daughter who preferred studying algorithms over attending social galas. My sister Nia, on the other hand, was 28, possessed our mother's lighter complexion, and had a natural talent for manipulating everyone in her orbit. Nia was the undisputed golden child. Her failures were always framed as temporary setbacks, while my successes were merely expected minimums. The most glaring example of this hypocrisy was Trey and Malik, who are Nia's twin toddlers. She had literally abandoned them with my parents for the past 3 years, so she could backpack across Europe and find herself. My parents raised those boys while praising Nia for her adventurous spirit, completely ignoring the massive financial and emotional burden she had placed on them. That Thanksgiving dinner was the perfect snapshot of our twisted family dynamic. Jamal and I arrived early to help, only to be banished from the kitchen so my mother could personally plate the appetizers for Nia's arrival. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child, my back aching and my feet swollen, but I stood silently by the dining room window while Jamal gently rubbed my shoulders. We watched Nia stroll through the front door an entire hour late, clinging tightly to the arm of her boyfriend Connor. Connor was a 30-year-old white guy who aggressively described himself as a cryptocurrency investment guru. In reality, he was a loud, unemployed grifter who used complex buzzwords to hide the fact that he was living entirely off whatever money Nia could squeeze out of our parents. The moment they walked in, the entire atmosphere of the house shifted to accommodate them. My mother rushed forward, practically pushing past my pregnant belly to embrace Nia, as if she had just returned from a grueling military deployment. My father, who had barely grunted a hello at Jamal earlier that afternoon, enthusiastically shook Connor's hand and immediately offered him a generous pour of his most expensive bourbon. Jamal and I took our seats at the far end of the long mahogany table, the unspoken designated zone for the supporting cast. Throughout the first course, the conversation was completely monopolized by Connor. Jamal, who actually managed multi-million-dollar portfolios for a living, tried to answer a question my father asked about the current housing market. Before Jamal could even finish his first sentence, Connor loudly cleared his throat and talked right over him. "Traditional markets are completely dead, man," Connor proclaimed, waving his fork dismissively in Jamal's direction. "You guys are playing a rigged game designed for the middle class. Nia and I just moved another 10 grand into this new alternative coin project. It is all about decentralized disruption. You just have to be smart enough to see the vision before the masses catch on. I felt Jamal tense beside me, but my husband maintained his flawless professional composure. He just took a calm sip of his water and let Connor ramble on. Nia leaned her head against Connor's shoulder, deliberately flashing her freshly manicured nails, and sighed dramatically. Connor is just so brilliant with this stuff, Nia cooed, looking at our parents for validation. We are building an absolute empire together. It is just so stressful right now because our current apartment is way too small for two ambitious entrepreneurs. We desperately need to upgrade to a luxury condo downtown, so Connor has a proper home office to manage his trades and monitor the global markets. My mother clapped her hands together, her eyes shining with absolute adoration. Oh, sweetheart, that is exactly what your father and I were discussing earlier today. You two deserve a space that reflects your massive potential. I kept my eyes focused on my plate, cutting my roasted turkey into small, precise squares. I knew exactly where this conversation was heading because I had spent my entire life paying for Nia's so-called potential. But even I could not have predicted the sheer breathtaking audacity of what my father was about to say next. My father cleared his throat loudly, tapping his silver fork against his crystal wine glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the low hum of the dining room, demanding absolute silence. He stood up at the head of the table, adjusting his tailored suit jacket, and beamed down at Nia and Connor with the kind of immense pride he usually reserved for his own reflection. Your mother and I have been talking. My father began, his baritone voice projecting as if he were addressing a crowded banquet hall instead of just the six of us. We look at you, Nia, and we see the future of this family. We see an ambitious young woman ready to take her rightful place in the world, alongside a partner who clearly understands how to generate real wealth. I felt Jamal stiffen slightly next to me. We both knew exactly what my father thought of real wealth. To him, it was all about flashy appearances, designer labels, and address codes. It had nothing to do with actual financial stability. We know that breaking into the luxury real estate market is crucial for your new business ventures. My father continued, smiling warmly at Connor. So Denise and I have decided to give you two an early wedding gift to secure that downtown condo. We are releasing the $90,000 from the family joint savings account to cover your down payment. The air in my lungs turned to ice. For a split second, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway. I blinked, staring directly at my father, trying to comprehend the absolute insanity of his words. The family joint savings account was a complete fabrication. 4 years ago, my parents had tearfully convinced me to open a joint account under the guise of creating a unified family emergency fund. They claimed it was a cornerstone of building generational wealth, a safety net we would all contribute to. But over the past 4 years, I was the only one who ever made a single deposit. Every bonus I earned, every tax refund, every spare dollar I scraped together from my consulting side gigs went straight into that account. It was my money, 100% of it. My parents had not contributed a single dime, and Nia certainly had not either. Nia gasped dramatically, covering her mouth with her freshly manicured hands. Oh my God, Dad, Mom, are you serious? That is so incredibly generous. I cannot even believe it. Connor pumped his fist in the air, looking incredibly pleased with himself. That is what I am talking about. Generational wealth in action. You guys are not going to regret this. I will triple that equity in 6 months tops. My mother leaned over and patted Nia on the cheek, her face stretched into a perfectly practiced, condescending smile. We just want to see you shine, sweetheart. It is your time. I placed my hands flat on the mahogany table. My voice was dangerously calm when I finally spoke. Excuse me, but you cannot give them that money. All eyes snapped to me. The triumphant smiles on my parents' faces melted into masks of instant irritation. What do you mean we cannot? Maya? My father demanded, his tone dropping an octave. It is family money. And as the head of this family, I am deciding how it is best utilized. It is not family money, Dad, I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even, despite the rage boiling in my veins. It is my money. I am the only one who has ever deposited a single cent into that account. Jamal and I have been saving that $90,000 for our own future. I am 7 months pregnant. I am not funding a luxury condo for Connor to play crypto trader in. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my mother scoffed, waving her hand in my direction as if swatting away a pesky fly. Maya, please stop being so dramatic and selfish. You and Jamal both have excellent salaries. You are doing just fine. I am doing fine because I work 60 hours a week and save my money. I shot back, staring her down. And being pregnant is not cheap. We are preparing for a child. Nia let out a loud, dramatic sigh, her perfectly glossed lips forming a practiced pout. Why do you always have to do this, Maya? Why do you always have to make everything about you? I finally find a great guy, I finally have a chance to build a real future, and you just cannot stand to see me happy. You are always competing with me. I watched her blink rapidly, forcing fake tears into her eyes, while Connor wrapped a protective arm around her shoulder. My mother immediately reached out to comfort her, shooting me a glare so toxic it could have peeled the paint off the walls. Competing with you? I asked, my voice remaining remarkably steady. Nia, you abandoned your twins. Trey and Malik are upstairs in their bedroom right now being raised by our parents because you decided motherhood was too stressful. And now you expect me to hand over $90,000 of my own hard-earned savings so you can live in a downtown penthouse. Do not bring the boys into this, my mother snapped, slamming her hand on the table. Your sister went through a very difficult transitional phase and she is finally finding her footing. You should be lifting her up, not tearing her down. As a Black woman, you should understand the importance of community and lifting up your sisters. Connor decided this was the perfect moment to interject his unwarranted opinion. Look, Maya, I get it. You are hormonal. You are stressed about the baby. But holding on to capital in a stagnant savings account is basically throwing it away due to inflation. By letting us leverage this capital for real estate, you are technically helping the whole family portfolio. I turned my head slowly and looked Connor up and down. Do not ever speak to me about my hormones or my capital again. You do not know the first thing about finance, and you certainly do not know anything about my family. My father stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. That is enough, Maya. I will not have you disrespecting guests at my dinner table. You have always been stubborn and greedy. We fed you, we clothed you, we put you through school. And the one time your sister needs a legitimate boost to get her life on track, you clench your fists and refuse to help. You are going to be a mother soon. Maya, my mother chimed in, shaking her head with profound disappointment. What kind of example are you setting for your child? A family shares its resources. We are releasing those funds to Nia tomorrow morning. You need to learn how to sacrifice for the greater good. It is time you stopped being so incredibly self-centered. They sat there looking at me with absolute contempt. My own parents looking at me as if I were the villain for refusing to let them steal my life savings to fund my sister's delusions. They really believed they held all the power. They believed that because my name was tied to theirs on that joint account, they could just bulldoze right over me through sheer intimidation and family guilt. They thought I was just the quiet, bookish daughter who would eventually cave to keep the peace. They had absolutely no idea that I had stopped playing their game months ago. Connor leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table and steepled his fingers together. A condescending smirk spread across his face, highlighting the sheer arrogance of a man who had never worked a hard day in his life, but fully believed he was the smartest person in the room. He looked at me with an expression of faux pity, the kind of look a teacher gives a slow student who just cannot grasp a simple concept. Maya, you are letting your emotions cloud your financial judgment, Connor said, his voice dripping with unearned authority. You are looking at this from a mindset of scarcity. You see $90,000 and you think you need to hoard it in a low-yield savings account for diapers and baby furniture. But wealth preservation is about synergy. It is about understanding that when Nia and I secure this luxury asset, we elevate the entire family brand. When we win, you win. You need to stop being so greedy and look at the bigger picture. Family loyalty means investing in the players who are going to bring the highest return. Right now, Nia and I are the growth stock and you are just holding dead capital. I stared at him, listening to this unemployed grifter mangle basic financial concepts while actively trying to steal my life savings. He was lecturing a director of data analytics and a senior wealth manager about capital and synergy, while wearing a suit he had undoubtedly bought with my parents' credit card. Beside me, Jamal reached his absolute limit. I felt the heat radiating from my husband. Jamal was a man of immense patience, but watching a mediocre scam artist disrespect his pregnant wife in her childhood home was the line. Jamal shifted his weight, planting his feet firmly on the floor. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, a subtle but deliberate physical preparation for confrontation. He took a deep breath, ready to verbally dissect Connor, to expose his fraudulent crypto portfolio, and to remind my parents exactly who was actually funding their lifestyle. Jamal was prepared to burn the entire dinner to the ground to protect me. I dropped my hands to my lap. Underneath the table, hidden from the view of my gloating parents and my smirking sister, my hands curled into tight fists. My fingernails dug so deeply into my palms that they left sharp crescent moon indentations. The rage inside me was a living, breathing thing, demanding to be let out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the heavy mahogany table. I wanted to list every single sacrifice I had ever made for this ungrateful family, and demand they beg for my forgiveness. But then I remembered the plan. I remembered the legal documents locked safely in the fireproof safe back at our house. I remembered the deed to this exact historic brownstone transferring into the name of the limited liability company that Jamal and I exclusively controlled. If Jamal tore into them right now, if I let my anger win and stormed out, they would never take the final bait. They would never sign the release forms. I needed their greed to blind them completely. I needed them to feel so powerful, so victorious, that they would not bother reading the fine print of the documents I was going to present to them tomorrow. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Underneath the table, I forced my fingers to uncurl. I stretched my hands flat, smoothing the fabric of my dress over my thighs. I reached over and placed my hand gently on Jamal's knee. He paused, turning his head to look at me. His eyes were blazing with protective fury, but when he met my gaze, I gave him a single, nearly imperceptible nod. I silently asked him to stand down. I communicated that I had this entirely under control. Jamal held my gaze for a heartbeat longer before slowly leaning back into his chair, his muscles remaining tense, but his silence secured. I reached for my teacup. The fine china clinked softly against the saucer as I lifted it. The entire table watched me. My father stood tall at the head of the table, his chest puffed out, waiting for my submission. My mother watched with hawk-like intensity, ready to strike if I uttered a single word of defiance. Nia had her chin resting on her hand, looking bored by the delay in getting her money. And Connor continued to wear that insufferable, knowing smirk, absolutely certain his ridiculous monologue about synergy had put me in my place. I brought the cup to my lips and took a slow, measured sip of my decaf tea. I swallowed. I set the cup back down on the saucer, making sure it did not make even the slightest sound. I picked up my linen napkin and delicately wiped the corners of my mouth, folding the fabric and placing it neatly beside my plate. I looked up, letting my eyes drift from Connor to Nia, then to my mother, and finally resting on my father. "Fine," I said. The word was quiet, but it carried through the room with absolute icy clarity. My father blinked, his thick eyebrows drawing together in momentary confusion. "What did you say?" "I said fine," I repeated, keeping my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "I am not going to fight you on this. You are the head of the family, Dad. If you and Mom believe that transferring my savings to Nia and Connor is the best financial move for the family legacy, then I will not stand in your way. Take the $90,000. The shift in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous and violently jarring. The heavy, suffocating tension evaporated, replaced by a sickening wave of collective triumph. They did not question my sudden surrender. They did not wonder why I went from fiercely defending my child's future to handing over my life savings in the span of 3 minutes. Their arrogance was so deeply ingrained that they genuinely believed they had simply worn me down. They believed their authority was absolute. My father let out a booming laugh of relief, clapping his hands together. "Now that is what I am talking about, Maya. I knew you would see reason once you calmed down. You have always been a smart girl. You know how to fall in line when it matters. My mother let out a long, dramatic sigh, pressing her hand to her chest as if she had just survived a grueling ordeal. Oh, thank heaven. I was getting a terrible headache from all this unnecessary friction. Maya, sweetheart, you are doing the right thing. You will see. When Naya is hosting us in her beautiful new downtown penthouse, you will realize how important it is to elevate your sister. This is what Black excellence looks like. We build each other up. Nia squealed with delight, throwing her arms around Connor's neck and planting a kiss on his cheek. We are getting the condo, babe. I need to call the realtor first thing in the morning and tell her we are wiring the down payment. We have to start looking at custom furniture immediately. Connor shot me a wink, pointing finger guns in my direction across the table. Good choice, Maya. Do not worry about a thing. I will send you guys a quarterly breakdown of the property appreciation. You will be thanking me when you see the return on investment metrics. I looked at them celebrating their theft. My mother was already discussing what kind of hors d'oeuvres they should serve at Nia's future housewarming party. My father was pouring another round of expensive bourbon to toast to Connor's negotiating skills. Nia was eagerly scrolling through her phone, probably adding luxury items to a virtual shopping cart. They were laughing, smiling, and toasting to their own brilliance. They looked so incredibly happy, so deeply satisfied with how easily they had stripped me of my resources to feed their endless vanity. They sat in my house, drinking my father's bourbon, utterly oblivious to the storm that was gathering right above their heads. They had taken the bait without a single moment of hesitation. I watched their triumphant, oblivious smiles, and I smiled back. The clatter of expensive porcelain scraping against marble countertops filled the kitchen. I stood at the sink, rinsing cranberry glaze off my mother's prized serving platters. The view over my shoulder captured the frantic energy buzzing just beneath my calm exterior, the room subtly shifting and trembling with my every breath. Jamal was still in the dining room, playing his part perfectly by nodding along to my father's endless cigar and scotch monologue, keeping the men distracted. My mother glided into the kitchen carrying an empty crystal wine decanter. She bumped her hip against mine, casually shoving me slightly to the left so she could access the dishwasher. She did not say excuse me. She never did. She placed the decanter on the rack and turned to me, a terrifyingly sweet smile plastered across her face. I am so incredibly proud of you, Maya, she said, her voice dripping with that sugary tone she reserved exclusively for when she got exactly what she wanted. You are finally learning how to be agreeable like your sister. It is so much more becoming on you than that stubborn defensive attitude you always carry around. I turned the faucet off. The sudden absence of running water made the kitchen feel suffocatingly quiet. I slowly turned my head to look at her, keeping my posture rigid. Agreeable like my sister, I repeated flatly. You mean compliant when it comes to funding her lifestyle? My mother rolled her eyes, letting out a sharp, exasperated breath. Do not ruin a good thing, Maya. Nia has a light about her. She draws people in. She knows how to navigate high society and build networks. You have always been so rigid, so painfully serious. It pushes people away. Rigid because I had to be the adult in this house since I was 18. I shot back, grabbing a dish towel and wiping my hands with deliberate, forceful motions. Do you remember my 18th birthday, Mom? Do you remember the prestigious art scholarship I won? The one I had to formally decline so I could work double shifts at the retail pharmacy. I gave up my dream school so I could help you quietly pay off Nia's $30,000 credit card debt before Dad found out and ruined his country club reputation. I was 18 years old, paying for her luxury handbags and spa weekends while she partied in Miami. My mother crossed her arms over her chest, her sweet facade dropping instantly into a scowl. That is ancient history, Maya. We are a family. We protect each other. Your sister made a youthful mistake and we handled it internally like a respectable family does. A youthful mistake, I scoffed, stepping closer to her. Is that what we are calling Trey and Malik now? Youthful mistakes. Because the last time I checked, those two boys are currently asleep in their bedroom upstairs. The same bedroom they have lived in for 3 straight years, while their mother backpacked across Europe and posted luxury bikini pictures from Dubai with a guy who does not even have a W-2 tax form. She abandoned her children, Mom. She dumped them on you and Dad so she could play pretend with Connor. She does not even know her own son's shoe sizes or that Malik is allergic to strawberries. She did not abandon them, my mother hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper. She grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging painfully into my skin. She went through a transitional phase to find herself after a very dark period. Motherhood overwhelmed her, and she needed time to heal. And she is back now. She is building a proper home for them. She is building a home with my money, I fired back, refusing to break eye contact or pull my arm away. And she is only taking the boys back because the downtown condo requires a family image for Connor to pitch his crypto nonsense to your church friends. She is using those boys as props, and you are actively funding the production. You are just jealous, my mother sneered abruptly, releasing my arm and aggressively smoothing the front of her own silk blouse. You have always been desperately jealous of Nia. Just because you have your father's dark complexion and his heavy features does not mean you have to carry this bitter chip on your shoulder for the rest of your life. The words hung in the air, toxic and familiar. She was saying the quiet part out loud again. Nia takes after my side of the family, my mother continued, her chin raised in defiance. She has a certain elegance, a certain presentation that opens doors in our community. She has the right look. It is the reality of the world, Maya. People invest in people who look like Nia. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and that is just the unfortunate truth of society. But do not take your deep-seated insecurities out on your sister, just because she gets a little financial help to maintain the standard we expect from her. I stared at the woman who birthed me, listening to her openly weaponize my skin tone and my work ethic in the exact same breath. She was actively admitting that my darker skin meant I owed the family my relentless labor, while Nia's lighter skin meant she was inherently owed the fruits of that very same labor. My mother genuinely believed that because I did not fit her colorist standard of black excellence, my only valid contribution to the family was my wallet. For years, comments like that would have sent me spiraling into days of self-doubt and depression. I would have internalized the rejection, trying desperately to prove my worth through more achievements, more money, more sacrifices. But standing in that kitchen, with the physical weight of my pregnant belly grounding me to the floor, I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, calculating clarity. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a soft, eerie whisper. "I have to work twice as hard. And because I worked twice as hard, I understand exactly how contracts work. I understand exactly how leverage works. I understand things that Nia and Connor could not even begin to comprehend." My mother looked at me, her brow furrowing in confusion. She was expecting me to cry, to argue, to storm out of the kitchen in a fit of emotional rage. She did not know how to process my sudden icy composure. "Just make sure Connor signs the bank release forms tomorrow morning," I said, turning my back on her and picking up another dirty plate from the counter. "I will not authorize the transfer of the $90,000 until every single piece of paperwork is legally binding. If you want the money for your golden child, you play by my rules." My mother huffed a dismissive breath, clearly deciding she had won the argument, and put me back in my designated place. "You always have to make things so needlessly complicated, Maya. Just send the paperwork to Jamal. Nia and Connor will sign whatever bureaucratic nonsense you need to feel important." She turned on her heel and marched out of the kitchen, heading back to the dining room to continue celebrating her monumental victory. I stood alone at the sink, watching the suds spiral down the drain. My hands were perfectly steady now. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a crystal-clear vision of the destruction I was about to unleash. They wanted to play a game of leverage and legacy. They wanted to strip me of my resources to fund a fantasy. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone, where the PDF of the liability release form was already waiting to be sent. They thought I was surrendering, but I was simply locking the door from the outside. The soft hum of my dual monitors was the only sound in my home office. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting long shadows across the sleek glass desk. This space was my command center, meticulously organized and entirely mine. The walls were painted a calming slate gray, a stark contrast to the stifling traditional decor of my parents' brownstone. On the left monitor complex, data visualizations mapped out market trends for my upcoming quarterly review. On the right, the final draft of the liability release contract was open, its dense legal jargon promising absolute freedom. I took a sip of my decaf tea, my eyes scanning the document one last time. Jamal had outdone himself. The language was precise, airtight, and utterly merciless, hidden beneath a veneer of amicable separation. It read like a standard agreement between estranged family members, designed to prevent future financial disputes. But buried within the clauses defining mutual separation of assets was the absolute surrender of any claim to corporate entities associated with my name. It was brilliant. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, resting my hand on my stomach. The baby kicked a sharp, reassuring flutter against my palm. "I am protecting our future little one," I whispered to the empty room. "No one is going to take what belongs to you." I turned my attention back to the screen and opened the secure portal for the family joint savings account. The balance sat there in bold black numbers, $90,000 exactly. For 4 years, I had treated this account like a sacred trust, sacrificing my own comforts to ensure my family had a safety net. Every deposit represented missed vacations, delayed renovations, and countless hours of overtime. And now they were treating it like a personal slush fund for Nia's reckless whims. I navigated to the transfer settings. The account was structured to require dual authorization for any withdrawal exceeding $10,000. My father, as the primary account holder, could initiate the transfer, but it would remain pending until I, the secondary holder, officially approved it. It was a fail-safe I had insisted upon when establishing the account, a rare moment of foresight that was now proving invaluable. I accessed the Pending Transactions tab. Sure enough, there it was. A transfer request for the full $90,000 initiated just 20 minutes ago from my father's IP address. The destination was an external account registered under Connor's name at a shady offshore cryptocurrency exchange. They had not even waited for morning. They were trying to drain the funds while I slept, assuming my surrender at dinner meant I would simply rubber stamp the theft. I clicked on the transaction details. A small green button pulsed on the screen demanding my authorization. All I had to do was click approve, and the money would vanish, instantly transferred into Connor's unregulated wallet. I did not click approve. Instead, I navigated to the security settings and enabled a temporary hold on the transaction. A system-generated message popped up confirming that the transfer was now suspended, pending manual verification from all account holders. I added a custom note to the notification. Transfer requires in-person signature release due to liability protocols. Please contact secondary account holder to arrange a meeting. I hit save. The trap was set. The bait was dangling right in front of them, locked behind a digital glass wall. They could see the $90,000, they could almost touch it, but they could not access it until they played exactly by my rules. I closed the browser tab, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. I had anticipated their greed, knowing they would try to rush the transfer before I could change my mind. By freezing the funds, I was forcing them to come to me. I was forcing them to step out of their territory and into mine. They would have to leave the comfort of their brownstone, the illusion of their authority, and face me in my own domain, where I held all the leverage. I picked up my phone and drafted a carefully worded text message to the family group chat. I knew they would be awake, frantically refreshing their banking apps, wondering why the money had not cleared. "Good morning, everyone. I noticed the transfer request for the $90,000. As this is a significant withdrawal transferring out of a joint family asset into a non-family member's external account, the bank requires a formal liability release to process the transaction. I have had a standard document drawn up to protect everyone involved. Please come to my house tomorrow at 10 in the morning so we can finalize the paperwork and release the funds to Connor." I read the message twice, ensuring the tone was perfectly helpful and bureaucratic. It needed to sound like an annoying bank requirement, not a personal ultimatum. I hit send and set the phone face down on my desk. The response was almost immediate. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the glass surface. I did not pick it up. I knew exactly what the messages would say. There would be indignation from my father complaining about the inconvenience. There would be passive-aggressive sighs from my mother framing my caution as unnecessary drama. There would be frantic texts from Nia worried that the delay might cost her the luxury condo. And there would be arrogant dismissals from Connor insisting the paperwork was a waste of his valuable trading time. Let them panic. Let them sweat. Let them feel the precise anxiety they had so eagerly inflicted upon me. They wanted my life savings. They were going to have to work for it. They were going to have to look me in the eye and sign away their future for a handful of cash. I pushed my chair back and stood up, stretching my aching lower back. I walked over to the window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. The houses here were modern, solidly built, and occupied by families who respected boundaries and valued hard work. It was a stark contrast to the toxic environment I had escaped. I had built a life here, a sanctuary for myself, Jamal, and our unborn child. I was not going to let my parents or my sister infect this space with their entitlement. Tomorrow they would cross my threshold expecting to leave with a fortune. They would leave with their $90,000, but they would also leave their entire legacy behind. They just did not know it yet. Jamal walked into the office carrying 2 fresh mugs of tea. He set mine down gently near my keyboard, his eyes immediately catching the buzzing phone. "They are taking it well, I assume," he asked, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. I glanced at the screen where notifications were stacking up rapidly. "Oh, they are absolutely thrilled. My father just told me that standard banking procedures are a myth invented to slow down true innovators. Connor probably fed him that line." Jamal shook his head, picking up his own mug. He began pacing the length of the office, his sharp, analytical mind shifting seamlessly into professional mode. His strides were measured confident, the pacing of a man who managed high-stakes negotiations daily. "Let us review the parameters one last time," Jamal said, gesturing with his free hand. "We need this airtight, Maya. If Marcus tries to challenge the Vanguard Holdings acquisition in court, after the fact, this document is our only shield. It has to be utterly flawless." I turned my chair to follow his movement. "I trust you, Jamal. You drafted it. Walk me through the kill shot." Jamal stopped pacing, turning to face me directly. His expression was dead serious, the easy humor replaced by the focused intensity of a wealth manager protecting his client's assets. "The core of the trap relies on the mutual release clause," he explained, setting his mug down on a side table. "In standard family financial disputes, establishing a clean break is notoriously difficult because courts tend to favor equitable distribution regardless of whose name is actually on the account. They look at intent." He resumed his pacing, his hands clasped behind his back. "Your parents intend to take this $90,000 as a gift. We are framing this contract as a formalized acknowledgement of that gift, but with a definitive finality. We are stipulating that this transfer represents the absolute conclusion of any and all financial obligations between Maya Washington and her immediate family members, including Marcus Denise and Nia Washington." I nodded, following his logic. "So by accepting the $90,000, they are agreeing that I owe them nothing else. Ever." "Exactly," Jamal said, pointing a finger at me for emphasis. "But that is just the defensive layer. The offensive layer, the kill shot as you call it, is buried in Section 4, subsection B." He walked over to my desk and leaned over my shoulder, pointing to the specific paragraph on my monitor. "Read it aloud, Maya." I leaned in, my eyes scanning the dense legal text. "The receiving parties hereby waive release and forever discharge the providing party and any affiliated corporate entities, trusts, or limited liability companies in which the providing party holds a controlling interest from any future claims, demands, or equitable rights to property or assets." I stopped reading and looked up at Jamal. He was smiling, that brilliant, wicked smile again. "Any affiliated corporate entities." Jamal repeated, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Vanguard Holdings LLC is an affiliated corporate entity. When your parents sign this document to get their hands on Connor's crypto funding, they are legally signing away any right to challenge Vanguard Holdings' ownership of their brownstone. They are acknowledging that they have no equitable claim to the property. They are basically signing their own eviction notice, I said, the reality of the trap fully solidifying in my mind. They are signing a waiver that prevents them from ever suing us when the eviction notice arrives, Jamal corrected. They are willingly disarming themselves. If they take this to a judge claiming you tricked them out of their house, the judge will look at this document. The judge will see that they accepted $90,000 in liquid cash in exchange for relinquishing all future claims. It will look like a highly unconventional but completely legal buyout. They chose the cash. They forfeit the property. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. It is ruthless, Jamal. It is survival. Maya, he countered, his tone softening as he looked at me. They were going to drain your savings to fund a scam artist. They mortgaged your childhood home to fund Nia's vacations. They have shown zero ruth when it comes to exploiting your hard work. We are just using the legal system to enforce the boundaries they refuse to respect. He walked over to the printer sitting on a small table in the corner of the office. He pressed the print command on his laptop. The machine whirred to life, pulling crisp white paper from the tray. I watched the pages slide out, each one carrying the weight of my family's impending downfall. The physical manifestation of their arrogance was printing right in front of me. We need multiple copies, Jamal said, gathering the pages and tapping them neatly against the table. One for them to sign, one for our records, and a spare just in case Connor decides to spill coffee on it in a fit of crypto-induced rage. I stood up, walking over to join him. I took the freshly printed contract from his hands, feeling the warmth of the paper. I flipped to the final page where the signature lines waited. 5 blank spaces. One for me, one for Jamal, one for my father, one for my mother, and one for Nia. Connor was intentionally excluded from the signature block. This was a family matter, and I wanted to make sure my parents understood they were legally responsible for taking the money, not him. I grabbed a blue ink pen from my desk and signed my name on the bottom line. I handed the pen to Jamal, and he quickly added his own signature. The bait is set, I said, looking down at our completed signatures. The $90,000 is sitting right there in the trap. Jamal took the document, placing it carefully into a sleek black leather folder. Tomorrow morning, they walk in. They sign the paper. We release the funds. And then we wait. We wait for Connor to do exactly what a grifter does. I finished the thought, turning to look out the window again. We wait for him to take the money and run. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a heavy, bruised gray. Tomorrow would be the closing day. Tomorrow they would realize that the shelter they thought they controlled actually belonged to the daughter they had always despised. The $90,000 was the cheese in the mousetrap, and my family was about to snap its own neck, trying to take a bite. The morning light broke over the city, casting a sharp golden glow across my home office. I sat perfectly still in my ergonomic chair, a stark contrast to the frantic, chaotic energy I knew was currently vibrating through my parents' brownstone. My workspace was an oasis of absolute calm. My dual monitors hummed quietly, displaying the steady flow of global market data, while a single cup of chamomile tea steamed on the coaster beside my keyboard. I had deliberately muted my phone, placing it face up on the glass desk so I could watch the notifications pile up without letting the noise disrupt my peace. Miles away on the other side of town, Connor was already spending money he did not possess. Thanks to a fake social media account Jamal had created for monitoring purposes, I had a front-row seat to Connor's morning performance. On my left monitor, I pulled up his public Instagram feed. He was broadcasting live to his modest following of fellow crypto bros and gullible aspiring entrepreneurs. He was standing in the showroom of a high-end European auto dealership, wearing designer sunglasses indoors and holding the camera at a high angle to capture the sleek lines of a charcoal gray sports car behind him. "We are making massive moves today," Connor bragged into the camera, his voice loud and obnoxiously confident. "Just securing some new assets. When you understand how to leverage decentralized liquidity, you do not have to wait for the traditional banking system to give you permission to live your best life. You just take control. Major capital deployment happening before lunch. Stay tuned to the channel to see how we disrupt the real estate market next." The camera panned slightly to reveal Nia standing nearby. She was holding an overpriced iced latte and aggressively flipping through a binder of premium fabric swatches. She was not even looking at the cars. She was already mentally decorating the downtown penthouse, operating under the absolute delusion that my life savings were successfully sitting in her boyfriend's digital wallet. She smiled for the camera, flashing a peace sign before complaining loudly to the car salesman about how long wire transfers take to clear in this archaic economy. I watched the salesman in the background of the video. His smile was strained, his posture stiff. He recognized a fraud when he saw one. He was politely but firmly asking Connor for proof of funds before tossing him the keys for a test drive. Connor waved him off with a practiced, arrogant flick of his wrist, promising the salesman that his private wealth manager was finalizing the transaction as they spoke. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. They had not even signed the liability release contract yet. They had not even bothered to show up at my house for the 10 o'clock meeting I had requested. They simply assumed that because my father commanded it, the universe would instantly bend to their will. My phone screen lit up brightly, shattering the quiet of my office. It was not a text message from Nia or an angry phone call from my father. It was an automated push notification from the secure banking app tied to the family joint savings account. The banner flashed in urgent red text. High-value wire transfer initiated. Immediate action required. I unlocked my phone and opened the banking portal, my eyes scanning the transaction log with clinical precision. They had actually tried to force it through. Without my signature, without the meeting, and without the legal paperwork, my father had attempted to bypass the dual authorization protocol. I clicked into the detailed audit trail. It painted a desperate, hilarious picture. Starting at exactly 8 in the morning, my father had logged into the primary account portal and tried to initiate a direct wire transfer of the full $90,000 to Connor's offshore crypto exchange. The system automatically flagged the amount and paused the transaction. 10 minutes later, my father tried again, dividing the money into two $45,000 transactions, hoping to slip beneath a perceived security threshold. The system flagged both. Then, according to the customer service logs attached to the account notes, my father had called the bank directly. I could perfectly picture him pacing the hardwood floors of his brownstone, his face red with indignation, shouting at some underpaid bank representative. I knew exactly the tone he used. He would have puffed up his chest, invoked his status as a long-standing premium client, and demanded they release his money immediately. He would have called the security protocols ridiculous and threatened to close all his accounts if they did not instantly wire the funds to his future son-in-law. But algorithms do not care about Marcus Washington's country club membership. Automated banking security protocols do not care how loud a man yells over the phone. The system only recognizes permissions, and my permission was explicitly withheld. A new notification popped up on my screen, replacing the first one. Transaction blocked. Secondary account holder. Digital signature required. Fraud prevention protocol engaged. The digital wall I had built held completely firm. The bank had locked down the transfer, requiring me to physically log in, authenticate my identity, and sign off on the movement of funds. Until I did that, the $90,000 was essentially trapped in a digital vault, suspended between my father's desperate demands and my absolute refusal. On the left monitor, Connor's Instagram live feed suddenly went dark. The broadcast ended abruptly. A moment later, my phone screen lit up with a barrage of text messages from Nia. The calm, confident facade she had been projecting in the car dealership had completely evaporated. "Maya, what is going on?" Nia demanded in the first text. "Connor is at the dealership and his broker is at the condo office. The wire is bouncing back. Dad said he authorized it this morning. Stop playing games and release the hold right now." Another message arrived seconds later. "You are embarrassing us, Maya." The salesman is looking at Connor like he is a scammer. "Just click approve. It literally takes 2 seconds. Do not ruin this for me just because you are jealous." I did not reply. I sat back in my chair, picking up my mug of chamomile tea and taking a slow, soothing sip. I let the silence stretch out, allowing their panic to marinate. They were currently standing in a high-end auto dealership, pretending to be millionaires while relying entirely on the frozen savings of the sister they despised. The humiliation they were feeling right now was entirely of their own making. My phone began to ring. The caller ID flashed with my father's name. I let it ring, watching the screen light up the dark glass of my desk. He called 3 times in rapid succession. When I did not answer, he left a voice message. I played it on speakerphone, filling my quiet office with his booming, furious voice. Maya, pick up the phone. The bank is telling me they need your digital signature to release the funds. This is completely unacceptable. You said last night you would not stand in our way. I am not going to let your petty bureaucratic delays humiliate Connor in front of his real estate brokers. You will approve this transfer immediately, or there will be severe consequences. I stopped the recording and deleted the voicemail. I opened the group chat containing my parents, Nia, and myself. I kept my response perfectly polite, entirely professional, and completely unyielding. Good morning, Dad. I typed, my fingers flying across the screen. As I mentioned in my message last night, this transfer requires a formal liability release due to the large amount leaving a family account for an unregistered external wallet. The bank flagged the forced transfer attempt as potential fraud. I am happy to release the hold and sign the authorization, but I will only do so in person after the liability release contract is signed by all parties. I am at my house waiting for you. I have coffee and pastries ready. See you soon. I hit send. I did not include a single exclamation point. I offered no apologies for the inconvenience. I simply restated the boundary they had tried to bulldoze right over. They were furious. They were embarrassed. They were currently looking like complete fools in front of the very people they were desperately trying to impress. And because of that intense, overwhelming humiliation, they were going to rush straight to my house. They were going to storm through my front door, blinded by rage and entitlement, eager to sign whatever piece of paper I put in front of them, just so they could get their hands on the money and save face. I looked over at the black leather folder sitting neatly on the corner of my desk. The contract was waiting. The trap was holding steady. All they had to do was walk in. The phone vibrated against the glass desk with such violent force it nearly rattled off the edge. The caller ID did not display my father's name this time. It flashed with a high-resolution photo of my sister posing on a yacht in Santorini. The name Nia filled the screen. I let it vibrate for 5 full seconds. I wanted her to feel the agonizing weight. I wanted the silence on my end to amplify the public humiliation she was currently experiencing. Finally, I reached out and tapped the green accept button, switching the call to speakerphone. Maya, what is wrong with you? Nia's voice exploded from the speaker, shrill and vibrating with absolute hysteria. The background noise was chaotic. I could hear the distinct echo of a large showroom floor, and Connor pacing nearby, muttering frantic curses under his breath. Good morning, Nia, I replied, my voice as smooth and placid as a frozen lake. Do not give me that corporate robot tone, she shrieked. You are doing this on purpose. You are deliberately trying to humiliate us. Connor is standing right in front of the regional manager of the dealership, and his broker is texting him non-stop about the condo. The wire transfer bounced back. You need to log in and approve it right now. I leaned back in my chair, letting my eyes drift over the sleek lines of my home office. I took a slow breath, centering myself. I told Dad in the group chat exactly what the situation is, Nia. The bank flagged the transaction as potential fraud. You are trying to move $90,000 of joint family funds into an unregistered offshore cryptocurrency wallet belonging to a man who is not a legal member of this family. The system locked it down. I cannot simply click a button and make it disappear. Yes, you can, Nia screamed. Dad said you just have to do the digital signature. You are holding my money hostage. It is not your money, I corrected her sharply, allowing just a fraction of my authority to bleed into my voice. It is the family savings. And because my name is on that account, I carry 50% of the legal liability for where those funds go. If Connor loses that money in a crypto scam or gets audited by the IRS, I am not going to be held financially responsible for his tax evasion. Connor is not a scammer, you jealous, miserable woman, Nia fired back, her voice cracking with desperation. He is a visionary. You are just threatened because he makes more in a day of trading than you and Jamal make in a month of sitting at your boring desk jobs. You just cannot stand the fact that I am leveling up. You have always been so bitter. I reached for my mug of chamomile tea, taking a slow sip. The warmth coated my throat, keeping my voice perfectly steady. If Connor makes so much money, Nia, why is he relying on my savings to buy his car and his condo? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The silence stretched out thick and suffocating. I had hit the nerve directly. It is called leveraging liquid capital. Nia spat out, regurgitating the buzzwords Connor had spoon-fed her. But you would not understand that. You do not understand how real wealth works. You are too busy nesting. You are 7 months pregnant, Maya. You are huge and hormonal, and you literally just sit at home anyway. What do you even need 90 grand for? Baby clothes? A fancier crib? You do not need capital. You are not building a brand. I am the face of this family. I am the one who has to maintain our image. You just want to keep this money locked away to punish me for being the one mom and dad actually believe in. The sheer audacity of her entitlement was staggering. She was actively mocking my pregnancy, belittling my life, and demanding the very money I had earned to fund her delusional superiority complex. For 28 years, she had relied on her lighter skin, her pretty face, and my parents' endless enabling to glide through life without consequence. She truly believed the universe owed her my paycheck simply because she existed. I placed my mug back on its coaster, aligning it perfectly. The coldness inside me solidified into something unbreakable. I need the liability release signed, Nia, I said, stripping all emotion from my words. That is my final offer. I am not signing any stupid contract, Nia yelled. Dad said we do not have to. He said he is going to call the bank manager and have you removed from the account for obstruction. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. Good luck with that. The bank cannot remove a primary account holder without a notarized signature and physical presence. And while Dad is busy screaming at customer service representatives, Connor is going to lose the hold on that luxury condo. The dealership is going to ask you to leave their showroom. You are going to walk out of there with nothing but a maxed-out credit card and a bruised ego. Maya, please. Her voice suddenly broke, shifting from aggressive entitlement to panicked manipulation. The switch was so fast it gave me whiplash. She was pulling out her ultimate weapon, the victim card. You are ruining my life. Connor is so angry right now. He is looking at me like I am a liar. He promised the broker the funds would clear by 10. You are embarrassing me in front of the man I love. Just sign the stupid authorization. I will do whatever you want. Please. I looked at the black leather folder sitting on my desk. The paper inside was crisp and waiting. Then get in your car, I commanded. You, Connor, Mom, and Dad. You all get in your cars and you drive to my house. I have the liability release printed and waiting on my dining room table. It is a standard waiver stating that I am gifting you the $90,000 and that from this moment forward, I am completely absolved of any financial or legal responsibility regarding you, Connor, or the family estate. You sign it acknowledging that I owe you absolutely nothing else. You take the money. We go our separate ways. A liability release. Nia repeated the legal term, clearly confusing her. She was trying to find the trap, but she did not possess the financial literacy to look in the right place. So if we sign it, you click approve, right then and there. The second the ink dries, I said. I heard muffled whispering on the other end of the line. Connor was coaching her, telling her what to say. He was undoubtedly assuming this was just a petty family squabble over tax liabilities. He had no idea he was walking into a corporate acquisition trap. Fine, Nia snapped her arrogant tone, returning the moment she thought she had a guaranteed path to the money. We are leaving the dealership right now. We are picking up Mom and Dad, and we are coming over. But you better have your laptop open and ready, Maya. I am not playing any more of your bitter little games. The line went dead. The sharp click of the disconnected call echoed in my quiet office. I picked up my phone and set it back down on the glass desk. I slowly spun my chair around to face the large window looking out over the manicured lawns of my neighborhood. The storm clouds were gathering, turning the morning sky a deep slate gray. They were coming. They were furious, entitled, and completely blinded by their own desperate greed. They thought they were driving over here to force my hand to sign a meaningless piece of paper to appease a hormonal pregnant woman. They thought they were about to secure a luxury condo and a sports car. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my maternity dress. I walked over to my desk, picked up the black leather folder containing the contract, and headed downstairs to the dining room. I placed the folder precisely in the center of the table, right next to a set of expensive fountain pens. They were rushing toward their own destruction, and they could not drive fast enough. The crunch of tires on wet gravel broke the silence of the neighborhood, followed by the slamming of 4 heavy car doors. I did not move toward the foyer immediately. I stood perfectly still by the dining room table, smoothing my hand over the dark leather of the contract folder. The doorbell did not just ring, it was held down, a long, aggressive, continuous buzz that perfectly communicated my father's furious entitlement. He was treating my front door exactly how he treated my boundaries. I walked to the entryway with a slow, deliberate stride. When I pulled the door open, the cold, damp air rushed in, bringing with it the overwhelming scent of my mother's expensive floral perfume and Connor's cheap, aggressive cologne. They stood on my porch, positioned in a tight, combative formation. My father loomed in the center, his chest puffed out and his shoulders squared, trying to physically dominate the space before he even stepped over the threshold. Connor flanked him, attempting to mirror my father's imposing posture, looking down his nose at me from behind his designer sunglasses. My mother and Nia stood just behind them, their arms crossed tight against their chests, their faces twisted into identical masks of absolute irritation. "Are we going to stand out here in the damp air, or are you going to let us inside to finish this ridiculous chore?" my father demanded, his baritone voice echoing off the brick walls of my porch. He did not say hello. He did not ask how my pregnancy was progressing. He simply issued a command, expecting the world to bow. I stepped back, pulling the door wide. "You know the way to the dining room, Dad." They marched past me, tracking wet footprints onto the pristine hardwood floor of my foyer. They did not bother to wipe their shoes. They moved as a single hostile unit, bringing the toxic atmosphere of their brownstone directly into my sanctuary. I closed the door, shutting out the storm, and followed them into the dining room. They refused to sit down. They stood around the mahogany table, leaning forward, resting their hands on the polished wood, intentionally trying to project superiority and impatience. From where I stood, they looked like towering figures of authority, radiating an overwhelming sense of temporary power. They believed they held all the cards because they had successfully bullied me into surrendering the money the night before. They thought my demand for paperwork was just the dying gasp of a defeated woman trying to save face. "Where is the laptop?" Nia snapped, tapping her long acrylic nails impatiently against the wood. "Connor has been texting the broker non-stop. We are already an hour behind schedule. You need to log in and authorize the wire right now before they give the condo to another buyer." Jamal stepped into the dining room from the adjacent kitchen, carrying my laptop securely under his arm. He walked with total composure, moving to stand directly beside me. He placed the laptop on the table but kept it firmly closed, resting his large hand flat on top of the aluminum casing. "The laptop stays closed until the paperwork is signed," Jamal stated, his voice carrying the calm, resonant authority of a man who handled hostile corporate takeovers for a living. "Good morning, Marcus." Denise. My father scowled, glaring at Jamal. "We do not have time for this legal theater, Jamal. Maya is transferring family funds to her sister. It is a private internal matter. We do not need to involve liability waivers like we are negotiating a corporate merger. This is extremely insulting." Connor let out a loud, dramatic sigh, shifting his weight and checking his oversized luxury watch. "Look, Maya, I get it. You watch a few finance podcasts and suddenly you think you are Warren Buffett. But you are clogging up the pipeline. In the fast-paced world of digital assets, agility is everything. You are creating unnecessary friction for a simple capital transfer. Just open the computer and click the button. When you actually manage your own wealth, Connor, you can skip whatever paperwork you like," I said, meeting his arrogant gaze with absolute glacial calm. "But when you are desperate to use my money, we do things exactly my way." Connor's jaw tightened, his smirk faltering for a fraction of a second, before he masked it with a dismissive roll of his eyes. My mother stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Connor's arm while shooting me a venomous look. "Maya, you are being needlessly combative," my mother scolded, her voice dripping with condescension. "We drove all the way out here in the rain because you threw a hormonal temper tantrum about a banking error. We are indulging this silly need of yours to feel in control. Do not push your luck. Show us the paper so we can sign it and leave." I did not argue. I did not defend my hormones or my mental state. I simply reached out and flipped open the black leather folder resting in the center of the table. The stark white pages of the contract lay perfectly flat against the dark velvet lining. As they leaned forward to inspect the document, the power dynamic in the room instantly visually shifted. I took a half step back, looking down at them as they huddled over the table. From this high angle, viewing them eagerly scrutinizing the bait, their imposing stature completely vanished. They no longer looked like towering figures of authority. They looked exactly like what they were: greedy, desperate people rushing blindly toward a trap. "This is a mutual separation of assets and liability release," I explained, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet room. "The bank flagged the transaction because $90,000 is a massive sudden withdrawal to an unregistered non-family account. To release my hold on the transfer, I require absolute legal immunity from whatever you choose to do with these funds." My father pulled a pair of reading glasses from his breast pocket and shoved them onto his face, quickly scanning the first page. "It just says you are gifting the $90,000 to Nia, and that we cannot hold you responsible for any taxes or losses related to the crypto exchange. That is the defensive clause," Jamal clarified smoothly, keeping his hand resting on the closed laptop. "But there is a reciprocal condition for the release of these funds." I placed my index finger on the second page, tapping the specific paragraph Jamal and I had meticulously crafted. I looked directly into my father's eyes, making sure my words penetrated his arrogant shell. "Read it carefully, Dad," I commanded. "I am making this incredibly simple and completely absolute. I give you the $90,000, but you waive all rights to any property, estate, or assets owned by me or my LLCs forever." The dining room fell silent, except for the sound of rain lashing against the large windows. My father stared at the paragraph, his lips moving silently as he read the legal jargon. My mother peered over his shoulder, her brow furrowed in annoyance. Nia did not even bother looking at the paper. She just stared at the closed laptop, practically vibrating with impatience. "Assets owned by you or your LLCs." Connor read aloud, letting out a sharp, barking laugh. He took off his sunglasses and shook his head, looking at me as if I were a delusional child. "What assets, Maya? You have a mortgage on this suburban house and a retirement account. You do not have a real estate portfolio. You run a tiny consulting side hustle. You are asking us to waive our rights to a corporate empire that does not even exist. You are playing make-believe." My mother let out a long, exasperated sigh, dropping her purse onto the table. "This is exactly what I mean, Marcus. She is obsessed with trying to sound more important than she actually is. She just wants to feel like a big-time executive. Let her have her little moment of power so we can get Nia's money and go." I kept my expression completely neutral, masking the profound surge of triumph racing through my veins. They were doing exactly what Jamal and I predicted. They were so blinded by their contempt for me that they completely dismissed the possibility that I possessed anything of real value. They assumed my LLC was just a tax shelter for freelance data entry. They could not fathom that the daughter they despised had amassed enough capital and strategic leverage to quietly purchase the distressed debt of their own historic brownstone. "Are you going to sign it or not?" I asked, my voice remaining perfectly detached. "You take the cash today, but you acknowledge that from this moment forward, you have zero legal, equitable, or familial claim to anything with my name or my company's names on it. You get your $90,000. I get my permanent peace of mind. That is the condition." My father snatched one of the fountain pens from the table. He did not hesitate. He did not ask to consult his own attorney. He did not bother to reread the fine print detailing the forfeiture of all equitable property claims. He was too desperate to prove he was the one dictating the pace of the room. If signing this paranoid piece of paper gets you out of my way and gets your sister her condo, then I will sign it gladly. My father spat, uncapping the pen. You can keep your imaginary corporate assets, Maya. We do not want anything from you except the cash you have been hoarding. He bent over the table and pressed the pen to the paper. The trap was springing shut, and they were enthusiastically pulling the lever themselves. The scratch of the heavy gold fountain pen against the thick parchment paper echoed loudly in the dining room. My father's signature was large, aggressive, and full of unnecessary flourishes, entirely reflective of his massive ego. The dark blue ink bled slightly into the fibers of the contract, flowing directly over the meticulously crafted legal clauses he had not even bothered to skim. He did not read the paragraph detailing the forfeiture of equitable claims. He did not let his eyes linger on the stipulations regarding my corporate entities. He just wanted to conquer the moment. "Here is your precious autograph, Maya," my father sneered, tossing the pen onto the mahogany table. It clattered against the wood, a harsh sound in the tense air. "I hope this little display of paranoia makes you feel secure. You have always been obsessed with protecting things no one even wants. Trust me, no one is coming after your suburban house or your little consulting projects. We operate on a completely different level of wealth." My mother stepped up next, picking up the pen with a theatrical sigh. She held it delicately as if the contract itself were something offensive. She looked at me with an expression of profound pity, shaking her head slowly. "You really need therapy, Maya," my mother murmured, scrawling her elegant cursive onto the line below my father's. "To think your own family is out to get you. It is a very sad way to live your life. We are signing this simply to humor you and to get Nia the capital she needs for her future. But do not think for a second that this piece of paper changes the fact that you have deeply disappointed us today." I watched the ink dry on her signature, feeling absolutely nothing but clinical detachment. They were literally signing away the roof over their heads while lecturing me about my psychological flaws. It was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. Connor tapped his foot impatiently against the hardwood floor, pulling his phone from his pocket and checking the screen for the 5th time in 2 minutes. "Come on, Nia, let us get this done," he urged, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. The broker just texted again. "We have a hard deadline of noon to wire the funds, or the seller is moving to the next offer. Just sign the thing so we can get out of here." Nia grabbed the pen, her eyes completely bypassing the text of the document. She was looking at the closed laptop under Jamal's hand, her gaze fixed on it like a starving animal looking at a meal. She quickly scribbled her name, her signature sloppy, and rushed, driven entirely by adrenaline and greed. "There," Nia snapped, shoving the contract folder across the table toward me. It slid across the polished wood, stopping inches from my hands. "We signed your ridiculous waiver. Now open the computer and do your part. If we lose this penthouse because you wanted to play lawyer for an hour, I swear I will never forgive you." I looked down at the document. The 3 signatures sat there, stark and undeniable. I let my eyes drift upward to read the fine print printed directly above their names. The text was crystal clear, explicitly stating the relinquishment of equitable interest in all primary and secondary real property holdings acquired by Vanguard Holdings, LLC. It was all there in plain English. They had traded their historic multi-million-dollar brownstone for a fast payout to a man who was already planning his exit strategy. I picked up the pen. The metal felt cool and heavy in my fingers. I looked at Jamal. He gave me a single sharp nod, his eyes locked onto mine. He knew exactly what this moment meant. We had crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back, and neither of us wanted to. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name with deliberate precision. Jamal took the pen from me and added his signature as the official witness and notary, solidifying the document into an ironclad legal weapon. I closed the folder and pulled it toward my chest. I turned to Jamal. "You can open the laptop now." Jamal lifted his hand and flipped the aluminum lid open. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh white glow over the tension-filled dining room. I reached out and pulled the laptop toward me, resting my fingers on the trackpad. I logged into the banking portal, navigating smoothly through the security prompts. My father, mother, Nia, and Connor crowded around the opposite side of the table, leaning forward in unison like a pack of wolves waiting for a kill. I opened the pending transactions queue. The $90,000 wire transfer was still sitting there, flagged in bright red, awaiting my final authorization. I hovered the cursor over the green approve button. Just click it, Maya Connor demanded, his voice cracking slightly with anxiety. Just hit the button. I looked up at my sister. The desperation in her eyes was palpable. She had tied her entire self-worth, her entire future to this man and this money. She had sacrificed her children for this illusion. Enjoy the condo, Nia, I said. I pressed down on the trackpad. The screen refreshed instantly. The red flag vanished, replaced by a bright green checkmark. A confirmation message popped up. Transaction approved. Funds have been successfully wired to the external account. Connor let out a loud whoop of victory, punching the air. Let us go, baby, he shouted, grabbing Nia's arm and pulling her toward the foyer. The capital is moving. I need to call the broker right now and confirm the receipt. We are locking this down. Nia did not even say goodbye. She did not say thank you. She just turned and ran after Connor, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. My father buttoned his suit jacket, puffing his chest out one last time. He looked at me with absolute disdain. I hope you are satisfied, Maya. You made this infinitely more difficult than it needed to be. Do not expect us to reach out anytime soon. You have made your bed. We will see you when you are ready to apologize, my mother added, lifting her chin haughtily. Enjoy your little house. They turned and followed the chaotic trail Nia and Connor had left, walking out my front door without a backward glance. The heavy door slammed shut behind them, rattling the frames on the hallway walls. Then there was silence. The deep, profound silence of a house that had just been purged of a toxic infection. I remained standing at the dining room table, my hand resting flat on the black leather folder. Jamal walked around the table, coming to stand closely behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. We stood there together, listening to the sound of my father's car engine revving in the driveway before tires screeched against the wet pavement, speeding away toward the city. It is done, Jamal whispered, his voice rumbling warmly against my back. The money is gone. I let out a long breath, releasing the tension that had been coiled in my spine for days. Yes, I said quietly. The money is gone, but the trap is officially closed. I opened the folder one last time, looking at the signatures. They thought they had just secured a $90,000 victory. They thought they had bullied me into submission and walked away with the ultimate prize. They had absolutely no idea that the timer had just started ticking. Connor was a grifter, and grifters never stay when the money clears. He was going to vanish, and when he did, the entire Washington family facade was going to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. And when they finally fell, when the bank called, when the broker rejected them, when the truth about the brownstone was finally exposed, they would have absolutely nowhere to run. They had signed away their only shelter. The countdown to closing day had officially begun. The camera cuts to a chaotic, shaky perspective following Nia's designer heels pacing across the polished marble floor of a high-end real estate office. The frantic movement reflects the mounting panic vibrating through her entire body. It was 72 hours after the signing at my house, closing day for the downtown penthouse. Nia was dressed impeccably, wearing a white tailored suit meant to project the image of a young, wealthy mogul closing her first major real estate deal. But her perfectly contoured face was currently slick with a cold, terrified sweat. She held her phone gripped so tightly in her manicured hands that her knuckles were stark white. She hit dial for the 15th time in 10 minutes, pressing the screen to her ear. It rang exactly once before clicking directly to an automated voicemail message. Connor was not answering. Connor was not even in the building. Nia paced back to the large glass conference room where her real estate broker, a polished woman named Sarah, sat tapping a gold pen against a stack of closing documents. Sarah's professional smile was beginning to crack around the edges, revealing the steep irritation of a broker whose time was being wasted. "Is he parking the car?" Sarah asked her. Tone clipped and overly polite. "We have the notary waiting. Nia and the seller requires the final wire confirmation before we execute these documents. We are 30 minutes past our scheduled appointment block. He is just dealing with terrible downtown traffic. Nia lied, her voice pitching upward an octave, betraying her panic. You know how unpredictable the financial district can get. He sent me the login credentials for the joint portfolio this morning. Let me just pull up the transfer code myself so we can keep things moving. The camera pushes in tight on Nia's hands, trembling violently as she opens the web browser on her phone. She navigated to the offshore cryptocurrency exchange Connor had been boasting about for months. The screen loaded, prompting her for the username and password he had confidently handed over on a sticky note just a few days prior. She typed the credentials, hitting the login button with a desperate, frantic tap. The loading circle spun for a torturous 3 seconds. Then the dashboard materialized. Nia's breath caught in her throat, freezing her lungs completely. The shaky camera angle mirrors her sudden loss of equilibrium. The large, bold numbers at the top of the digital portfolio did not display the $90,000 my parents had surrendered. It did not show the massive returns Connor had promised. The balance displayed on the screen was exactly $0.00. Nia blinked rapidly, shaking her head as if the motion could physically rearrange the pixels on the screen. She swiped down to refresh the page. 0. She clicked into the transaction history, her vision blurring with hot, terrified tears. There was the incoming wire transfer from my father's bank account, the $90,000 arriving perfectly on schedule. And sitting right directly above it, timestamped a mere 45 minutes after we had signed the liability release at my dining room table, was an outgoing transfer. The entire $90,000 had been routed into an anonymous, untraceable cold storage wallet. Connor had not invested it. He had not leveraged it for the condo. He had swallowed it whole. No, Nia gasped, the word barely a whisper escaping her trembling lips. No, this is a glitch. The system is glitching. She frantically backed out of the banking app and opened Instagram. She navigated to Connor's profile, desperate to see a recent post to find some evidence that he was still in the city, still her brilliant cryptocurrency visionary. But the search bar yielded nothing. The screen flashed a sterile gray message, user not found. He had not just deleted the app, he had scorched his entire digital footprint. Connor had packed his bags, secured the $90,000 from the gullible family of his desperate girlfriend, and vanished into thin air like a ghost. He was likely already on a flight out of the country, sipping champagne funded entirely by my parents' arrogant stupidity. Is there a problem with the wire? Sarah asked, standing up from the conference table, her voice dropping its polite customer service veneer. Nia could not speak. The walls of the luxury real estate office were rapidly closing in on her. She stumbled backward, her designer heels catching awkwardly on the marble floor. She turned and practically ran out of the glass conference room, pushing past a startled receptionist and bursting out through the heavy glass doors into the bustling downtown street. The camera follows her in a chaotic, frantic tracking shot as she stumbles down the crowded sidewalk, completely ignoring the curious stares of passing pedestrians. The pristine white suit she had bought specifically for this victorious closing day now looked like a cruel joke. She leaned heavily against a brick building, gasping for air, her chest heaving as a full-blown panic attack seized her lungs. She pulled her phone back up, her hands shaking so violently she dropped the device onto the concrete. She let out a jagged sob, scrambling to pick it up with her perfectly manicured nails scraping against the pavement. She found my father's contact in her favorites list and hit the call button, holding the cracked screen against her cheek. The phone rang twice before my father answered, his voice booming and cheerful, expecting to hear that the penthouse was officially theirs. Well, if it is not the newest property owner in the family. Tell me the keys are in your hand, sweetheart. Dad. Nia wailed, her voice shattering completely, breaking into a loud, hysterical sob that echoed down the busy city street. Dad, he is gone. Connor is gone. The jovial tone in my father's voice evaporated instantly, replaced by sharp confusion. What are you talking about, Nia? Where did Connor go? Did he go get the car? He took the money. Dad, Nia screamed, gripping her hair, her pristine image entirely forgotten in the face of absolute financial ruin. The crypto account is empty. It is at zero. He blocked my number. He deleted his social media. The $90,000 is gone. He stole it. He stole all of it and he left me here. There was a terrifying dead silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that precedes a catastrophic implosion. My father, the man who had mortgaged his historic brownstone and sacrificed his financial future to fund this exact moment, was currently standing in his living room, processing the fact that he had just been robbed blind by a man he had proudly welcomed into his home. "Stay right there, Nia," my father finally ordered, his voice sounding hollow, completely stripped of its usual booming authority. "Your mother and I are coming to get you right now. Do not talk to anyone. Do not do anything. We are going to fix this." The call disconnected. Nia slid down the rough brick wall, collapsing onto the damp city pavement in her expensive white suit. She buried her face in her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The luxury condo, the flashy lifestyle, the arrogant superiority over her older sister, it had all been a cheap, fragile illusion constructed by a con artist. And now the illusion had shattered, leaving her with absolutely nothing but the crushing reality of her own gullible greed. The countdown had finished. The trap had executed flawlessly. Connor had taken his stolen prize and run, leaving my family standing in the wreckage of their own catastrophic hubris, staring directly into the abyss. The camera tracks backward at a frantic pace down the grand hallway of the historic brownstone, mirroring the sudden, chaotic unraveling of my parents' perfect world. Marcus lowered his phone from his ear, his hand trembling so violently that the device nearly slipped from his grasp. He stood frozen on the imported Persian rug, staring blindly at the antique chandelier hanging above him. Denise emerged from the formal living room, holding a stack of pristine country club invitations. She took one look at her husband's ashen face and stopped dead in her tracks. "Marcus, what is it?" she demanded, her voice sharp with immediate irritation rather than concern. "Did Naya sign the papers? Are they moving the furniture in today?" "He is gone." My father choked out, his booming baritone completely reduced to a hollow, ragged wheeze. "Connor is gone. The crypto account is empty. He took the $90,000 and disappeared." The stack of thick cardstock invitations slipped from my mother's hands, scattering across the polished hardwood floor like fallen leaves. She let out a short, breathless gasp, her hands flying to her chest. "What do you mean, he is gone? Call the bank, Marcus. Call the police. Have them freeze his accounts right now. It is unregulated cryptocurrency." "Denise," my father shouted, the sheer panic finally breaking through his paralysis. "There is no bank to call. There is no manager to threaten. It is completely untraceable. He robbed us. He robbed our daughter, and he ran." The camera whips around to capture my mother's reaction. The polished, sophisticated matriarch of the Washington family instantly dissolved into a frantic, hyperventilating mess. But her panic was not for her heartbroken daughter sobbing on a downtown sidewalk. Her panic was entirely focused on the terrifying prospect of public humiliation. "The gala!" Denise gasped, grabbing my father's arm and digging her nails into his expensive suit jacket. "The autumn charity gala is in 3 weeks. I already told everyone at the church and the club that Nia was closing on $1 million penthouse today. Everyone knows we funded the down payment. We are going to be a laughingstock, Marcus. They will say we were conned by a white boy with a fake Rolex. We will lose our standing on the board. You have to fix this." My father ripped his arm away from her grip, his survival instincts kicking in. His entire identity was built on being the man who could buy his way out of any problem. He needed a solution, and he needed it before the rumors started spreading through their elite social circles. "I will fix it," he barked, marching down the hallway toward his lavish home office. The camera follows him in a tight, fast-paced dolly shot, keeping his sweating, frantic face perfectly in frame. "We just need to liquidate an asset. We cover the $90,000 loss ourselves. We buy Nia a modest townhouse quietly, and tell everyone she decided to pivot her real estate investment strategy. We spin the narrative." "With what money, Marcus?" my mother shrieked, chasing after him. "You drained the last of the liquid cash paying off Nia's credit cards last year. We do not have $90,000 lying around. We have this house, my father fired back, slamming the heavy oak doors of his office open. We have equity. We sell the brownstone. Denise stopped dead in the doorway, her eyes wide with horror. Sell the brownstone. Are you out of your mind? This house is our legacy. It is a lifeline, my father countered, already ripping through the files on his massive mahogany desk. We sell it fast to a private cash buyer. We pay off the remaining balance on the secondary mortgage, take the profit, and downsize. We tell the community we are emptying our nest and moving to a modern high-rise for the convenience. It maintains the illusion of wealth and it bails out your daughter. He did not wait for her agreement. He snatched the desk phone from its cradle and pounded the buttons, dialing the private number of his high-end real estate broker. Vincent. My father barked the moment the line connected, instantly forcing his voice into its usual tone of booming, arrogant authority. I need a favor. I need to list the brownstone today. Quiet listing off market cash buyers only. I need a 30-day close. Vincent sounded surprised but eager to please over the speakerphone. Marcus, that is quite sudden but certainly doable. Properties in your historic district are highly sought after. Let me just pull up the county registry to check the exact lot dimensions and verify the current title status so we can expedite the paperwork. Do it, my father commanded, pacing behind his desk. He reached for a crystal decanter, pouring himself a heavy measure of bourbon with a shaking hand. He needed the burn of the alcohol to steady his nerves. He took a massive swallow, grimacing as it hit his throat. The camera slowly orbits the desk, capturing the agonizing seconds of silence as the clicking of Vincent's keyboard echoed loudly through the speakerphone. Denise stood in the doorway, twisting her diamond rings nervously. Marcus the broker finally said, his professional tone suddenly dropping into genuine confusion. There is a massive discrepancy here in the county records. Did you recently transfer the deed to a corporate holding company to shield it from the bank? My father froze the crystal glass, halting halfway to his mouth. Shield it from what bank? I have been managing the secondary mortgage directly. Just read me the title status, Vincent. Vincent hesitated, the sound of his breathing heavy over the line. Marcus, the bank offloaded your distressed mortgage 3 months ago. The debt was purchased by a private entity, and the deed was legally transferred in lieu of foreclosure. You do not own this property, Marcus. You have not owned it for 90 days. The crystal glass slipped from my father's fingers. It hit the edge of the mahogany desk and shattered, sending shards of glass and expensive bourbon flying across the floor. What are you talking about? My father roared, leaning over the desk and screaming into the speakerphone. I am the sole owner of this house. Read me the name on that registry right now. It is registered to a limited liability company. Vincent replied, his voice tight with the uncomfortable realization that he was witnessing a wealthy man's absolute ruin. The owner on record is Vanguard Holdings, LLC. The name dropped into the room like a live grenade. Vanguard Holdings, LLC. My father stared blankly at the speakerphone, his mind completely failing to process the information. He opened his mouth to shout another demand, but a horrifying strangled sound came from the doorway. He turned to look at my mother. Denise was clutching the doorframe, her face drained of all blood, looking absolutely ghostly. Her eyes were wide with a terror so profound it seemed to age her 20 years in a single second. She was not looking at my father. She was staring at her own hands, remembering the heavy gold fountain pen she had held just 24 hours ago. She remembered the dining room table at my house. She remembered the black leather folder. She remembered the specific legal jargon she had scoffed at, calling me paranoid and mentally unstable. Denise, my father demanded, stepping around the desk. What is it? What is Vanguard Holdings? Assets owned by me or my LLCs? Forever, my mother whispered, her voice shaking so violently the words barely formed. That was the clause, Marcus. The liability release we signed yesterday so Nia could get the $90,000. Maya said we had to waive all rights to any property or assets owned by her or her LLCs forever. My father stopped dead. The realization hit him with the force of a speeding train. The breath rushed out of his lungs, leaving him gasping in the center of his lavish home office. Maya is Vanguard Holdings. My mother sobbed. her knees buckling as she slid down the doorframe and collapsed onto the hardwood floor. She bought the debt, Marcus. She bought the house 3 months ago. She let us sign that paper yesterday so we would legally surrender any right to fight her in court. We just gave away our only defense. We gave her the house. The camera pushes in tight on my father's face, capturing the exact moment his towering ego completely shattered. He had mortgaged his family legacy to fund Nia's fake business. He had stolen my savings to fund Nia's fake lifestyle. And in his blind, arrogant rush to take my money, he had eagerly signed a legally binding contract that officially finalized his own eviction. They had traded their multi-million-dollar historic brownstone for $90,000 in cash. And Connor had already stolen the cash. They had absolutely nothing left. They were officially homeless, trespassing in a house owned by the daughter they had spent their entire lives treating like garbage. The camera holds a wide, steady shot from inside the warm, brightly lit foyer of my home. The pristine oak floors and soft, golden lighting create an impenetrable fortress of peace. Outside the large, frosted glass panels of the front door, a violent winter rainstorm lashes against the porch. The contrast is absolute. Inside is control. Outside is a collapsing world. The tranquility shatters with a sudden explosive pounding against the heavy wooden door. It is not the polite chime of the doorbell. It is the frantic, desperate hammering of fists. The blows vibrate through the glass, shaking the frame. They are here. Jamal walks up beside me, sliding his hand onto the small of my back. He looks at the rattling door with a mixture of disgust and protective fury. "I can send them away," he says, his voice a low rumble of absolute support. "I can call the police and have them removed for trespassing." I place my hand over his and shake my head slowly. "No," I reply, keeping my breathing perfectly even. "They need to hear this directly from me. I need to look them in the eye when the final thread is cut." I step forward and unlock the deadbolt, pulling the heavy door open. The freezing rain whips across the covered porch, blowing in a damp, bitter chill. Marcus, Denise, and Nia stand huddled together, looking like survivors of a shipwreck, rather than the elite society figures they pretend to be. The polished facade of black excellence has literally washed down the storm drain. Nia's expensive white tailored suit is soaked and stained with city grime, her mascara running in dark, jagged streaks down her cheeks. My mother looks completely unhinged, her normally immaculate hair plastered flat against her skull, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she clutches her designer purse. My father stands in front, trying desperately to project his usual towering authority, but his shoulders are hunched and his breathing is ragged. He looks exactly like a cornered animal. "Maya, let us in," my father barks immediately, trying to push past me into the warmth of the foyer. "We are freezing, and we have a catastrophic family emergency to deal with right now." I do not move. I plant my feet firmly on the threshold, blocking his entry. My pregnant belly forms a physical barrier, a shield protecting the sanctuary of my home from their toxic chaos. Jamal steps up right behind me, his towering frame casting a shadow over my father. "You are not coming inside," Jamal states, his voice carrying the dangerous calm of a warning shot. "You can say whatever you came to say right there on the porch." My father's face flushes a deep, angry crimson. He points a shaking finger at Jamal. "Do not use that tone with me, young man. We have just been robbed. That white trash grifter Connor drained the entire crypto account and fled the state. He took every single dime of the $90,000. Nia lets out a loud, agonizing wail, burying her face in her hands. "He blocked my number, Maya," she sobs hysterically, her voice cracking with the devastation of her shattered ego. "He deleted his Instagram. The broker called and canceled the condo contract. I have nothing. I am completely ruined." My mother grabs my arm, her manicured nails digging into my sleeve. "You have to fix this, Maya," she pleads, her voice shrill with frantic desperation. "We have the autumn charity gala in 3 weeks. Everyone at the church and the country club thinks Nia is moving into a luxury penthouse. We cannot face them. We will be a laughingstock. You and Jamal have to bail us out. We need another $90,000 wired to Nia's account by the end of the business day to save the real estate deal and save our reputation. I stare at her, completely fascinated by the sheer limitless boundaries of their delusion. They had just been robbed blind by a con artist they actively chose to fund over their own pregnant daughter, and their immediate instinct is to demand that I empty my bank account a second time, solely to protect their social standing. Jamal, you are a wealth manager. My father pivots, turning his aggressive demands toward my husband. You have access to liquid capital. You have wealthy clients. You need to pull some strings, float us a short-term bridge loan from one of your accounts, and get that money to Nia right now. And Maya, my father, continues turning his blazing, desperate eyes back to me. Do not think we do not know about your little stunt with the bank. Vincent told me everything. I know Vanguard Holdings is your company. I know you bought the distressed debt on the brownstone 3 months ago. It was a cute trick, Maya, very clever, trying to scare us. But playtime is officially over. You are going to sign the deed of the brownstone back into my name immediately so I can leverage the equity, pull out some cash, and clean up this mess. They hurl their demands through the pouring rain, shouting over the thunder and the sound of their own escalating panic. They order me to drain my savings. They order Jamal to commit literal financial fraud and embezzle from his clients. They order me to hand back a multi-million-dollar real estate asset that my company legally purchased simply because they demand it. They are drowning in an ocean of their own making, and they are fully expecting me to let them use my body and my future as a raft. I step out onto the covered porch, the cold air biting at my skin. I hold up my left hand, signaling Jamal to stay in the doorway. In my right hand, pressed firmly against my chest, I carry the black leather folder containing the contract they signed exactly 24 hours ago. I do not yell back. I do not defend my husband's impeccable career. I do not mock Nia for her terrible taste in men or her profound gullibility. I do not utter a single syllable. I simply let the silence do the heavy lifting. I stand there on my porch, holding the legal document, and I stare at them with absolute glacial emptiness. The silence stretches out heavy and suffocating. It acts as a mirror, forcing them to hear the echo of their own ridiculous demands. It forces them to hear the raw, pathetic desperation in their own voices. The rain continues to pour, drumming loudly against the roof, but the shouting slowly dies down. My father's chest heaves as he runs out of breath, his pointing finger slowly lowering to his side. Naya's sobs reduce to pathetic wet hiccups as she looks up at me with terrified, bloodshot eyes. My mother's frantic grip on my arm slowly loosens and falls away as she looks at the blank, unyielding expression on my face. They finally realize that their volume holds absolutely zero power here. They realize that they are standing in the cold, begging on my property, demanding my money, and I am not giving them a single inch of ground. The illusion of their authority dissolves completely in the freezing rain. My father swallows hard, his imposing stature crumbling under the terrible weight of my silent stare. Maya, he says, his voice finally dropping to a hoarse, defeated whisper, please, we are your family. We are begging you. The camera begins a slow, relentless push-in on my face, isolating my expression from the storm raging behind my family. I look down at my father, watching the rain plaster his expensive tailored suit to his trembling shoulders. He is begging. The great Marcus Washington, the man who built an entire identity on the illusion of untouchable black excellence, is standing on my porch in the freezing downpour, pleading for mercy. I do not blink. I do not offer a comforting smile or a reassuring touch. I simply lift the black leather folder, pressing it against my chest. You are not begging your daughter, Dad, I say, my voice slicing cleanly through the sound of the wind and rain. You are begging your landlord, and my patience expired a very long time ago. I slowly open the folder. The thick parchment paper of the liability release contract is safely enclosed behind a waterproof plastic sleeve. I hold it up, ensuring the bright porch light illuminates the blue ink of their eager, rushed signatures at the bottom of the page. I want to remind you exactly what you traded your dignity for, I state, looking from my father to my mother, and finally to Nia. Yesterday you stood in my dining room and scoffed at this document. You called me paranoid. You mocked my business. You laughed at the idea that I possessed any assets worth protecting. You were in such an incredible rush to fund Connor's cryptocurrency scam that you did not bother to read the fine print. My mother's eyes widen, her gaze dropping to the folder. Her hands begin to shake violently. Marcus, she whispers, her voice cracking with pure terror. Marcus, she is holding the contract. I look directly at my father, locking him in a gaze of absolute zero gravity. Allow me to read it to you now, Dad, since you skipped this step yesterday. I recite the clause from memory, my voice ringing out with pristine enunciation. The receiving parties hereby waive release and forever discharge the providing party and any affiliated corporate entities from any future claims, demands, or equitable rights to property or assets. I pause, letting the legal jargon hang heavy in the freezing air. Then I translate it into a reality they can no longer deny. Vanguard Holdings LLC is my affiliated corporate entity. I explain carefully, pronouncing every syllable. 3 months ago, Vanguard Holdings legally purchased the distressed debt on your historic brownstone. We bought the note because you defaulted on a secret secondary mortgage you took out to pay for Nia's failed skincare brand and her European vacations. You were weeks away from bank foreclosure and total public ruin. I saved the house. I own the deed. My father's jaw drops open. He staggers backward a single step, as if I have physically struck him in the chest. His eyes dart wildly, searching my face for any sign of a bluff, any hint of a cruel joke. He finds absolutely nothing but the cold, hard concrete of the truth. But that is not the best part, Dad. I continue, taking a slow, deliberate step forward on the porch. If I had simply evicted you 3 months ago, you would have dragged me into family court. You would have claimed equitable interest. You would have cried to a judge that I was a predatory daughter stealing your legacy. You would have tied me up in litigation for years. I tap my manicured fingernail directly against his signature on the contract. But yesterday you signed this, I say, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You legally and voluntarily surrendered any and all equitable claims to Vanguard Holdings assets in exchange for a $90,000 cash payout. You signed away your only legal defense against eviction. You gave me the house free and clear with zero avenues for a legal challenge. You traded a multi-million-dollar piece of real estate for $90,000 in cash. And the best part is the absolute poetry of this entire situation is that Connor has already stolen the cash. You traded your home for absolutely nothing. The devastation sets in. The camera captures the real-time psychological destruction of the Washington family in agonizing, visceral detail. My father lets out a choked, suffocated gasp, grasping at his chest. The towering patriarch, the man who dictated the lives of everyone around him, entirely crumbles. He drops to his knees on the wet concrete of my porch, the freezing rain beating down on his bowed head. He is utterly defeated, outplayed, and stripped of every ounce of his unearned pride. My mother lets out a piercing, shattered scream. She turns on Nia like a feral animal, grabbing her golden child by the shoulders of her ruined white suit and shaking her violently. "This is your fault," my mother shrieks, her voice tearing through the storm. "You brought that white trash thief into our house. You made us give him the money. You cost us our home, Nia. You lost everything. You ruined us." Nia does not fight back. She just stands there crying hysterically, a broken, empty shell of the arrogant influencer she pretended to be just yesterday. The reality of her actions, the sheer catastrophic magnitude of her stupidity, has finally crushed the life out of her delusions. She looks at me, her makeup running down her face in dark, muddy rivers, silently begging for a salvation she knows I will never provide. I do not intervene. Jamal stands stoically beside me, an immovable pillar of support, simply watching them tear each other apart on our doorstep. They are finally experiencing the exact environment they created for me my entire life. I reach into the back pocket of the black leather folder. I pull out a crisp, thick envelope bearing the official seal of my corporate attorney. "Dad," I say, projecting my voice over my mother's screams and Nia's sobbing. My father slowly lifts his head from the concrete, His face is entirely washed of color, his eyes hollow and vacant. I hold the envelope out to him. He reaches up with a trembling wet hand and takes it from my fingers. That is your official 30-day notice to vacate the premises, I state, delivering the final devastating blow with absolute precision. Vanguard Holdings is placing the brownstone on the market next month. You have exactly 30 days to pack up whatever belongings are not bolted to the floor and leave my property. If you are still inside the house on day 31, I will have the county sheriff physically remove you for trespassing. My father stares at the white envelope in his shaking hands, as if it is a venomous snake. He cannot speak. He cannot argue. There is no negotiation left to be had. The board has been cleared. The game is entirely over. I look at my mother, who has stopped shaking Nia and is now staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. I look at Nia, who is shivering violently in the cold, clutching her stomach and sobbing uncontrollably. And finally, I look down at my father, kneeling on the wet concrete, holding his own eviction notice. You always told me that family shares its resources, Mom, I say, echoing the exact words she used to guilt me at the Thanksgiving table. You told me I needed to learn how to sacrifice for the greater good. Well, you sacrificed your home to fund Nia's poor life choices. I hope you feel like you elevated the family brand. I step back, pulling the heavy front door with me. Jamal steps back, matching my movement perfectly. Have a safe drive back to my house, I say. Make sure you wipe your feet before you step on my hardwood floors. I pull the door firmly shut. The heavy deadbolt slides into place with a loud, definitive clack, locking them out in the freezing storm. I stand in the warm, quiet foyer of my home, leaning back against the solid wood of the door. Jamal wraps his arms around me, pulling me into a deep, secure embrace, resting his hand gently over our baby. The storm continues to rage outside, but inside my walls there is nothing but absolute glorious peace. The debt has been collected in full, the slate is wiped entirely clean. The 30 days following that stormy night passed with the swift, merciless efficiency of a corporate liquidation. The camera glides through a smooth, seamless montage, capturing the absolute dismantling of the Washington family facade. We start with a slow pan across the grand foyer of the historic brownstone. The opulent Persian rugs and expensive antique console tables are gone. In their place sit dozens of cheap brown cardboard boxes hastily taped shut. The towering portrait of my parents that once hung proudly over the grand staircase has been taken down, leaving a stark, discolored rectangle on the expensive wallpaper. It is the visual representation of their erased legacy. My parents did not hire a luxury moving service. Without access to their heavily leveraged credit and with the absolute reality of their financial ruin staring them in the face, they were forced to rent a moving truck themselves. The camera captures my father, Marcus Washington, sweating through a cheap cotton shirt as he struggles to carry a heavy television stand down the front steps. His face is pale, drawn, and exhausted. His former country club friends and elite church associates, who usually drove down this picturesque street, conveniently found other routes to take. The neighborhood gossip had spread with devastating speed. The community knew the Washingtons had been quietly evicted. The pristine, untouchable image of Black excellence they had weaponized against me my entire life had completely evaporated. The camera pans smoothly, bridging the visual gap between their past and their present, landing on the exterior of a drab beige apartment building next to a noisy interstate highway. We push through the thin, hollow door of their new 2-bedroom rental. The space is cramped, suffocatingly small, and smells faintly of old cooking grease and stale carpet cleaner. Boxes are stacked precariously in the tiny living room, blocking the only window. My mother, Denise, sits on a faded sofa they bought from a discount warehouse. She is staring blankly at a television that is not turned on. Her designer clothes have been sold to consignment shops to cover their security deposit. She holds her phone in her lap, staring at the screen as she watches her wealthy social circle actively ignore her calls. The country club membership was revoked due to non-payment. The charity gala she had bragged about hosting went on without her. She is entirely invisible to the world she once ruled, and the silence of her new cheap apartment is deafening. The camera glides past my mother, sliding smoothly through the thin drywall and transitioning instantly to the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights of a 24-hour mega warehouse store. The smooth pan settles on Nia. The bespoke white tailored suit she wore on the day she thought she was buying a luxury penthouse is a distant memory. She is wearing a stiff, scratchy polyester uniform vest over a faded polo shirt. Her hair is pulled back into a messy, functional knot. There are deep, dark circles under her eyes. She stands at checkout lane number 4, scanning an endless mountain of bulk groceries for a customer who does not even look at her. The scanner beeps with a sharp, monotonous rhythm, matching the pounding headache behind her eyes. Her hands, the same hands that used to flaunt freshly painted acrylics while mocking my career, are now dry and cracked from breaking down cardboard boxes in the stockroom. Nia's phone vibrates in her pocket. She pulls it out during a brief lull in the line. The camera angles down to capture the cracked screen. It is a notification from a debt collection agency alerting her to another missed payment on the $30,000 of credit card debt she racked up funding Connor's illusion of wealth. She swipes the notification away, fighting back tears of absolute exhaustion. There are no more European vacations. There are no more luxury skincare launches funded by my father's secretly mortgaged house. There is only the brutal, unforgiving reality of an overnight shift and a mountain of financial consequences she cannot charm her way out of. She glances at the clock on the wall, realizing she has 4 more hours of standing on her aching feet before she can take the bus back to our parents' cramped apartment. She has completely ruined her own life. The crushing weight of their new reality eventually broke whatever pride my father had left. 2 weeks after they moved into the rental apartment, the desperation finally overrode his shame. He realized that the life he had built was truly gone, and the only person who possessed the resources to save him was the daughter he had thrown away. I was sitting in my home office reviewing a portfolio acquisition when my assistant transferred a call. She warned me that the man on the line sounded frantic and was refusing to leave a message. I knew exactly who it was. I clicked the button to record the call for my legal records and put him on speakerphone. Maya, my father said the moment the line connected. His booming, authoritative baritone was entirely gone, replaced by a thin, wavering plea. Maya, please do not hang up. Just listen to me for 1 minute. I did not speak. I simply let the recording capture his desperation. We are suffocating, Maya, he begged, his voice cracking. This apartment, it is terrible. Your mother cannot stop crying. Her blood pressure is dangerously high, and we cannot afford her preferred medication. Nia is working night shifts, and she is completely falling apart. We have nothing left. I know what we did was wrong. I know we were blinded by the prospect of that condo, and I know we treated you horribly. But we are your family. I am your father. You cannot just leave us in this place. You have the brownstone. You have millions in your corporate accounts. Just a fraction of what you have could get us out of this lease and into a decent townhouse. A loan, Maya. Just a small loan. We will sign whatever you want. Please show some mercy. He was crying. Marcus Washington, the man who had ordered me to hand over my life savings to a grifter, the man who told me I needed to learn how to sacrifice for the greater good, was openly weeping over the phone, begging for the exact mercy he had viciously denied me when I was pregnant and vulnerable. I reached out and ended the call. I did not say a single word. I did not offer a comforting lie or a harsh reprimand. I simply severed the connection. I downloaded the audio file and forwarded it directly to Jamal and our corporate attorney, along with a brief set of instructions. The next afternoon, a courier arrived at my parents' cramped rental apartment. My father opened the door, hoping against hope that I had sent a check. Instead, the courier handed him a thick manila envelope bearing the crest of a premier law firm. Inside was a formal cease and desist order. The document did not contain any emotional language. It was a cold, hard, concrete wall of legal boundaries. It explicitly referenced the liability release contract they had eagerly signed in my dining room, reminding them that they had legally severed all financial and familial ties in exchange for the $90,000 they subsequently lost. The letter stated that any further attempts to contact Maya Washington, Jamal Washington, or Vanguard Holdings, LLC by phone, email, or physical proximity would be treated as targeted harassment and would result in immediate legal action, including the filing of a permanent restraining order. Attached to the cease and desist was a transcribed copy of my father's pleading voicemail highlighted alongside the specific clause where he had previously waived his right to ever ask me for money again. There was no negotiation. There was no family meeting to hash out their feelings. There was only the absolute flawless execution of the consequences they had brought upon themselves. They had reached out begging for a lifeline, and I had responded by showing them the lock on the door they had built with their own greed. They were permanently sealed in the life they had chosen, and I was entirely free. The absolute silence of my newly secured life did not last long, but when the noise returned, it was a joyful sound of my own choosing. While my parents and Nia were drowning in the catastrophic consequences of their own greed, there was still collateral damage left in their wake. Trey and Malik. My sister had abandoned her twin boys for 3 years to chase an illusion of luxury, and now she was entirely incapable of providing even the most basic necessities for their survival. My parents, confined to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment beside a noisy highway with absolutely zero disposable income, could no longer absorb the financial cost or the physical energy required to raise 2 active toddlers. The pristine facade they had used to mask their neglect was completely gone, exposing the raw, undeniable truth that those innocent boys were in imminent danger of becoming the next generation of emotional scapegoats. I was not going to let that happen. I instructed my corporate attorney to immediately pivot our focus from real estate asset management to family law. We filed an emergency petition for full legal guardianship of Trey and Malik. I expected a bitter fight. I expected my father to puff out his chest in a courtroom and declare that the Washington legacy belonged under his control, regardless of his financial ruin. But poverty is a brutal, unapologetic truth serum. When the mediation date arrived, my parents did not even bother to show up. Nia sat across from me at the polished conference table, looking completely hollowed out. She did not wear designer clothes or fresh acrylic nails. She wore the heavy, dark exhaustion of a woman who had finally hit the bottom of a very deep well. When my lawyer presented the strict financial requirements for raising the boys, alongside the overwhelming, undeniable evidence of her past abandonment and current instability, Nia did not argue. She did not raise her voice or hurl bitter insults. She simply picked up the pen and signed the guardianship papers with a trembling hand, surrendering her children because she finally realized she had absolutely nothing left to offer them. She traded their future for a $90,000 illusion, and this was the final receipt. The camera captures a steady, warm, and bright shot slowly pulling back to reveal the expansive, beautiful living space of our home. The harsh, freezing rain of that final confrontation on the porch is replaced by brilliant golden afternoon sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The camera glides smoothly across the pristine hardwood floors, capturing a scene of absolute peace and unshakable stability. Jamal is sitting on a plush cream-colored rug, building a massive, towering structure out of wooden blocks with Trey and Malik. The boys are laughing loudly, their faces lit up with a genuine, carefree joy they had never been allowed to express in my parents' rigid household. They are not treated as burdens here. They are not props used to project a fake image of familial success to impress country club associates. They are simply allowed to be children, safe, protected, and completely cherished. The underlying anxiety they used to carry has entirely melted away, replaced by the confidence of knowing they are finally in a home where love is not conditional. I stand by the large window watching my family. Cradled securely in my arms is my newborn daughter. She is sleeping soundly, wrapped in a soft green blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect steady rhythm. I look down at her beautiful dark skin matching my own, and I feel a fierce, overwhelming surge of protective pride. She will never know the suffocating weight of being the family disappointment. She will never be told that her complexion determines her value or her duty to serve others. She will grow up knowing that her mother fought a ruthless war to ensure her environment was impenetrable and entirely pure. I look out over the manicured lawn, feeling the solid, unyielding foundation of the life I built from the ground up. People often misunderstand the true concept of revenge. They think it requires screaming matches, dramatic public ruin, or actively seeking out ways to destroy the people who hurt you. But true retaliation is much quieter and infinitely more lethal than that. The sweetest revenge is not about proving your point to toxic people who are fiercely committed to misunderstanding you. It is about rendering them completely irrelevant. It is about constructing a reality so secure, so deeply rooted in truth and financial autonomy, that their manipulation simply bounces off your walls. I did not destroy the Washington family. I simply handed them a fountain pen and allowed their own staggering arrogance to write their final chapter. I took the power they tried to steal from me, and I used it to legally purchase the very ground beneath their feet. I established my boundaries, reinforced them with ironclad legal precision, and built a fortress of peace they will never be allowed to enter. I broke the cycle of abuse and rescued the innocent lives caught in their crossfire. I am Maya Washington. I control my assets, I control my legacy, and most importantly, I control my own peace,